قد خلت النذر من بين يديه ومن خلفه ألا يوم عظيم. قالوا أجئتنا لتأفكنا عن آلهتنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين. قال إنما العلم عند الله وأبلغكم ما أرسلت به ولكني أراكم قوما تجهلون. فلما رأوه عارضا مستقبل أوديتهم قالوا هذا عارض ممطرنا بل هو ما استعجلتم به ريح فيها عذاب أليم تدمر كل شيء بأمر ربها فأصبحوا لا يرى إلا مساكنهم كذلك نجزي القوم المجرمين. ولقد مكناهم في ماء مكناكم فيه وجعلنا لهم سمعا وأبصارا وأفئدة فما أغنى عنهم سمعهم ولا أبصارهم ولا أفئدتهم من شيء إذ كانوا يجحدون بآيات الله وحاق بهم ما كانوا به يستهزئون. ولقد أهلكنا ما حولكم من القرى وصرفنا الآيات لعلهم يرجعون. فلولا نصرهم الذين اتخذوا من دون الله قربانا آلهة بل ضلوا عنهم وذلك إفكهم وما كانوا يفترون. وإذ صرفنا إليك نفرا من الجن يستمعون القرآن فلما حضروه قالوا أنصتوا فلما قضي ولوا إلى قومهم قالوا يا قومنا إنا سمعنا كتابا أنزل من بعد موسى مصدقا لما بين يديه يهدي إلى الحق وإلى طريق مستقيم. يا قومنا أجيبوا داعي الله وآمنوا به يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم ويجركم من عذاب أليم. ومن لا يجب داعي الله فليس بمعجز في الأرض وليس له من دونه أولياء أولئك في ضلال مبين. أولم يروا أن الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض ولم يعي بخلقهن بقادر على أن يحيي الموتى بلى إنه على كل شيء قدير. ويوم يعرض الذين كفروا على النار أليس هذا بالحق قالوا بلى وربنا قال فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكفرون فاصبر كما صبر أولو العزم من الرسل ولا تستعجل لهم كأنهم يوم يرون ما يوعدون لم يلبثوا إلا ساعة من نهار بلاغ فهل يهلك إلا القوم الفاسقون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين كفروا وصدوا عن سبيل الله أضل أعمالهم والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وآمنوا بما نزل على محمد وهو الحق من ربهم كفر عنهم سيئاتهم وأصلح بالهم ذلك بأن الذين كفروا اتبعوا الباطل وأن الذين آمنوا اتبعوا الحق من ربهم كذلك يضرب الله للناس أمثالهم فإذا لقيتم الذين كفروا فضرب الرقاب حتى إذا أثخنتموهم فشدوا الوثاق فإما منا بعد وإما فداء حتى تضع الحرب أوزارها ذلك ولو يشاء الله لانتصر منهم ولكن ليبلو بعضهم ببعض والذين قتلوا في سبيل الله فلن يضل أعمالهم سيهديهم ويصلح بالهم ويدخلهم الجنة عرفها لهم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تنصروا الله ينصركم ويثبت أقدامكم والذين كفروا فتعسا لهم وأضل أعمالهم ذلك بأنهم كرهوا ما أنزل الله فأحبط أعمالهم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. How is everyone doing? So let's do a sound check. Let me know that you can hear me and see me okay, and that the sound is clear. Here, I like this. Here for the pre-Husari show. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Okay, so alhamdulillah wa salatu salamu ala rasulillah. So we're continuing with our introduction to the Hanbali madhab, and today we're going to be talking about how we get from fiqh to fatwa. So the legal, what I call the legal scaffolding for a fatwa. So fatwa is not simply answering off cuff or what you think, but there is a process. As we mentioned yesterday, there is a There are guiding principles. There is information that must be collected, and then there's a body of knowledge that must be drawn from. Um, and so today we're going to continue with what we started with at the very end of yesterday, and that is talking about hadithat al-fatwa or hadithat waqi'at al-fatwa, the circumstance for which a fatwa is being sought. So someone has a question, right? They're going to come to the mufti, and they're going to ask that person. The mufti is answering the question. The person who is being answered is called al-mustafti. Al-mustafti is the person who يطلب الفتوى. So استفعال على وزن استفعال أي يطلب الفعل. So يستفتي, استفتى, he is asking for a fatwa. Okay. So what is hadithat al-fatwa or waqi'at al-fatwa? It's the circumstance for which a fatwa is being sought. It's not the fatwa itself, it's the circumstances. And this is more general than waqi'a fiqhiyya, than a fiqh issue or a fiqh appeal, because it has circumstances that are specific and not applicable to others. We mentioned yesterday that in order for a fatwa to be issued, we need three things. We need ma'rifat al-adillah, right? So we have to be of that level of ijtihad, not ijtihad mutlaq. We're not saying unrestricted. Oh, you think you're Abu Hanifa now. We're not saying that. We're saying that within the confines of the madhab, we have gone through the requisite training to understand the proofs of the madhab, how they are applied and what they applied to. And then we also need ma'rifat al-asbab. We need the knowledge of the causes. And this is connected to usul al-fiqh. This is the idea that there are certain things that necessitate a ruling to be issued. And then number three is ma'rifat al-bayyinat. This is the science of judicial evidence, right? This is where we have a chain of evidence, where we know what is an acceptable evidence versus what is not, what is considered to be testimony versus what is considered to be hearsay, what is admissible versus what is not admissible. And so the evidences that are needed for this fatwa are of two types: adillat wuqu' al-fatwa wa adillat wuqu' al-hukm al-shar'i. We mentioned those yesterday. Today we're going to go into what each of these mean. So adillat wuqu' al-fatwa, let's talk about that. Those things that are known rationally and empirically are essential to take into consideration when considering a fatwa appeal. If an appellant, meaning a mustafti, asks about something that defies logic, defies rationale, defies empirical norms, then the mufti must take that into consideration. Note that this generally relates to those things which are shurut, conditions, mawani', preventers, or asbab, reasons or causes. For example, the permissibility of an investment in something that gives returns that are impossible to accrue in the time stated. The mufti must take into consideration that there may be underlying issues that the appellant is unaware of or not informing the mufti of. And this is something that I've actually faced during my time as a Sharia advisor at Al-Rajhi Bank. We had the most stringent Sharia council, I think, in the history of Islamic banking. And they were very particular about making sure that things were done correctly. And we would have to do very broad, in-depth research on new products that were brought and were sought for approval. So one time we had a Western financial institution led by Muslims working for it, claiming that they were doing Islamic banking, bring us what they called a cash sweep product. And apparently this cash sweep product meant every day we'll collect the cash out of all of your accounts. We'll put it into short-term murabaha contracts, doing murabaha with palm oil or gold and silver or whatever it is. And then we'll return, the cash to you as well as your profit. The only problem with this is that the returns that were promised were so high that it was literally impossible, given predominant market conditions, to be able to actually make that profit, which meant that one of two things were happening. Either the information was incorrect, or they were taking that money and not doing murabaha with it, but we're lending it out again and taking guaranteed returns through interest-bearing loans. And so when we asked if the information was correct, they were telling us, "Hey, these returns look rather high." They said, "Yes, those are the returns." It pretty much it was, and okay, well, aren't these the market conditions for palm oil in Malaysia or the London metals market? Yes, they are. Okay, then how do you have these returns over here? There was not a lot of disclosure after that. So you have to be able to look beyond just I need to fulfill the need of this person by answering their question, then actually look if what they're telling you is factual or not. Another example is the passing of 3 menstrual cycles during iddah, in a time that's non-typical for a woman. Like, for example, when a woman divorces, then she has to go through 3 menstrual cycles to ensure that there's no pregnancy, and for there to be time for reconciliation or mediation, if that is possible. But if she comes and she says, "You know what? I'm done with this. I don't want to be with this man anymore, so I'm going to get out of it as quickly as possible. I'm going to go and tell the mufti, hey, I had 3 menstrual cycles in a span of 15 days, and I was bleeding for 4 days, and then I was clean for a day, and I was bleeding for 4 days, and I was clean for a day, and I was bleeding for 4 days, and I was clean for a day." Okay, but if your menstrual cycle was 7 days from the first to the 7th of the month, and the remaining days you were clean, it is highly improbable that you went under a drastic change that magically met the needs of you having to exit that relationship. So you have to decide what is actual factual. And because of this is why some scholars, when these types of claims became too common, they would actually mandate 3 months instead of the natural cycles, so that they can guarantee that this time had passed. For example, another one is if a person comes and asks the question that they are a traveler, but all the circumstances of their presence show that they're a resident, then you need to ask and basically look beyond the question to see if they're trying to get out of doing something that they should be doing as a resident, thinking that if I consider myself a traveler, then I'll be able to um, I'll be able to take a dispensation or an allowance. For example, there are some people who say, well, as long as I'm not at my home, I am therefore traveling, and therefore even if I live in an area for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but I'm never considering myself to be at home, then I'm a traveler, and so I can shorten and combine my prayers. This is incorrect. Why? Because it goes against the norm of what it means to be a traveler. You are not a traveler when you are stationary, a resident in a place that you are um, buying property and renting long term and grocery shopping and doing everything that a resident does, except you're not calling yourself a resident. So we have to take that into consideration when answering questions as well. Okay, from Adillat Wuqu' al-Fatwa is the idea of expertise and custom. So custom, convention, and known expertise are a means for discerning facts about what's being asked about, right? So this might mean that you have to confirm details from the person asking for the fatwa, and it may be to provide a ruling to the person. So it might be to confirm information, or it might be able to narrow down what you need to tell them. So when there's a general custom or a specific convention, right, or the expertise of a specific segment of experts is established, it's accepted in confirming the conditions, preventers, so ash-shurut wal mawani' wal asbab, the conditions, preventers, and reasons for a ruling. All right. So what does it mean to accept the general custom and convention? What kinds of customs, what kinds of urf? We know that من الأدلة الشرعية في القواعد الفقهية أن العادة محكمة. That from the Sharia-based evidences in Islamic legal maxims is that custom is a probative source of law. When we have silence in the Quran, in the Sunnah, in the texts of Islam about an issue, we go to the custom. But what kind of custom is acceptable? So the kind of custom that is acceptable is the following. It must not contravene the Sharia. So somebody cannot come and say, well, you know, our custom is that we don't care about the prohibition of riba, and therefore we deal with it. That's been our custom. We've always done that. We say that custom contravenes the Sharia and therefore is not permitted, right? It must also not have been negated by specific agreement, like in contracts. So, for example, yesterday we talked about I sold you a Mustang, and everybody's mind immediately went to the car. Because I live in Texas, my mind went to a horse. If we had signed a physical contract or even electronic contract where I had specifically said that I'm selling you a horse, then we would have no choice but to use the contract at hand, because my custom and your custom were negated by a text that that solemnizes and concretizes what we meant. And you might say, well, I didn't realize what I was signing. That's not the fault of the person that was signing the contract. You're responsible for reading, understanding, and negotiating your contracts appropriately. Okay. What evidence, or I'm sorry, what conditions does custom have to follow? Number one, custom is evidence of occurrence. العرف دليل الوقوع والنصوص دليل الجواز أو المنع. Custom simply tells us that something occurred, does not tell us if it was permissible or not. Therefore, if you claim that something is a custom, okay, the action claimed as a custom must be used to prove its occurrence and not be used to prove its permissibility. This is a big problem with a lot of modern discussions on, and this is my field, Islamic finance. So people will say, you know, لَقَدْ وَقَعَ فَهُوَ جَائِزٌ. Right? This has occurred. People do this. Therefore, it's permissible. There's a little bit more into it than that. Just as people will say, لَقَدْ قِيلَ فَهُوَ جَائِزٌ. It's been said, expressed as an opinion by scholars. Therefore, it's permissible. This is also a problem. So when we are looking at custom, we use the custom to determine the suitability of a ruling, but not derive the ruling itself. So what then determines the ruling in absence of a text? Is it the custom itself? We said custom is a probative source of law. It makes us probe and look into why we're saying this is permissible. So if it contravenes a text in general or specific, then the custom is no longer valid. But if it is something that people have been acting according to, that there is a maslaha, there's a benefit in, that there is a haja, there's a need for, and it doesn't contravene, and we find generations of people acting according to that, then this goes to the issue of istishab. This goes to the issue of stare decisis, or the continuity of acting according to something, according to what's called al-jawaz al-asli, according to the original state of its permissibility, right? And that jawaz could be, that could al-ibahat al-asliya or al-ibahat al-aqliya, a number of different things that can be said about that. Customs must also be dignified and respected. If a custom contravenes the Sharia specifically or generally, that it brings harm or encourages bad behavior, then it's rejected. Somebody says, well, this is the dance of my people, and we dance like this on Eid. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he witnessed, I believe it was Banu Arafah or Banu Arafah, I don't remember the name of the tribe, but they did a spear dance on Eid in the masjid, and he allowed Aisha to look and things like that. So we do a dance on Eid, and this is our custom. So you can't come and say that this is wrong. But if that dance is lewd, provocative, inappropriate, then it's not dignified and respected, and therefore it must be rejected. Also, the custom should be generally or specifically consistent. It is not a custom if it is done by some people and not others, or it was done at some times but was then not done at others. That just means that it was a choice by people made at different times, and it wasn't something that became generally accepted amongst people. The custom should be prevalent at the time of the issue to avoid anachronism. Nobody can come and say, well, this was the custom of people 100 years ago. Well, sure, but we're not living 100 years ago. We're living now. And this is and people have changed the way that they do business or the way that they agree upon things. Also, as we mentioned, the custom should not be negated specifically by contract. Okay. Expertise. Expertise, or khibra, is where you take the testimony of a proficient, knowledgeable professional who's versed in the details of a specific area of know-how. Son, can you give me some water? Yes, please. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says about the sale of buried material. Okay, buried, things, vegetables, minerals, whatever. For one to say that this is gharar, or unknown, majhul, is not the place of the faqih or his domain. This is the domain of the experts of this. If they consider it to be gambling, qimar, or gharar, then they know better. The domain of the faqih is to say such a thing is permitted as Allah has allowed it, or such a thing is forbidden, jazakallah khair, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has proscribed it. This is an i'lam al-muwaqqi'in. What is some of the evidence of this? The evidence of this is because the suitability of the description given is referred back to those who know. Sa'ad ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, su'ila Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam an bay' al-rutab bit-tamr. The Prophet was asked about selling fresh dates for dried dates. He said, ayanqusu idha jaf? Do they decrease when they dry? They responded yes, and so he forbade that transaction. So if I go back to the carrot example, how do I know that these carrots are allowed to be sold? When do I know that they're actually harvestable? Well, if I pull every carrot up, I might be pulling every single carrot out of the ground before it's actually ready to be pulled, and therefore destroying my crop before I can ever make a sale. But if I leave it in the ground too long, then it's probably going to get rotted or eaten by gophers or something, or rabbits. So what do? I go to farmers who say, when the carrot exhibits these attributes and those attributes, they are ready to be sold. Even though you can't see the carrot in the ground, we know that the probability of it being good is higher than the probability that they're not. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed people to sell dates that were on trees. He said, "La tuba hatta tasfar aw tahmar." These dates on the trees, they should not be sold until they turn red or they turn yellow, because that was the sign that they are ripe or that they are ready for sale. Here, the Prophet ﷺ, in this hadith about selling fresh dates for dry dates, he was relying on the testimony of people who dealt with dates. The Prophet ﷺ was an Arab. He lived in the Arabian Peninsula, but he was from Mecca. People of Mecca were merchants. The people were not people of agriculture. And so the Prophet ﷺ asked the person who was a person of agriculture if such and such thing happened. And what was the qa'idah shar'iyya? Al-qa'idah al-shar'iyya fi al-riba an al-jahl bit-tasawi kal-ilm bit-tafadul. Ignorance of parity or equal measure is like knowledge of there being an overage. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Muhammad. Similar, we find amongst the companions. Prophet, for example, in the Sunan of al-Bayhaqi, Umar radiallahu anhu, he hears a woman complaining, and I believe he's actually mentioning that she was kind of lamenting his absence through poetry. Alaikum salam. She was lamenting his absence through poetry, and he had been sent out in war. And so Umar radiallahu anh, he asked his daughter Hafsa, how long can a woman wait to be without her husband? And she said, 4 months. So therefore, he set a schedule for troops to be brought back and to be with their families at that time, taking the testimony of somebody who knew. Calculation and survey, al-hisab wal-masaha, the intent here is to understand the applicability of the conditions, the preventers, the reasons through technical knowledge. Okay, this could be known by going to references, right? And it might not be a particular custom convention or expert, but we might say, well, there is a technical standard for how certain things are dealt with, and therefore we are going to use that technical standard. So you might be working in an area of business that, for example, designates that a certain thing is done in a certain way. And so if somebody comes and claims that, well, I bought the car, off of the factory line, and it was I was unable to, I was unable to drive it because the engine had seized, then we would say, well, the technical standard when an automobile is off the factory line is it operable or not? We would look to see how many, has it been test driven? Has oil been put into it? And if it was sold as is, as operational, and then something happened where it seized, it might have been through misuse or neglect and not necessarily because of a defect from the factory line. Right? So if these standards are designated in contract or are known to be the norm even without a contract, then we take the standard in consideration. As the scholars have said, al-ma'rufu urfan kal-ma'rufi, al-ma'rufu urfan kal-mashruti shartan. That which is known conventionally is like a stipulated condition. So in the convention of any given area of expertise, if there's a standard that the entire industry abides by, you cannot come and claim the opposite of that standard or try to say that somehow, it happened differently unless you have hard evidence. Okay, tawatur, mutawatir reports. They are those reports that are conveyed by so many people that it is hard to deny that this thing actually happened. And they're taken as supporting evidence in forming a ruling. But the mufti has to be careful, however, not to take all of the details as verified when only general parameters can be verified. So, for example, a woman comes to a mufti. She says, my husband is committing zina and he has girlfriends. And many people saw him in public with other than me. And so the mufti goes and he says, okay, bring me witnesses. And he finds out and he sends his assistants to go to the marketplace. Did you see this man, with this woman in the marketplace at this time? And it might come back to, yes, in fact, I know who this man is and I saw him with this woman and they were in public and that is not his wife. I don't know who she is, but I know that that's not his wife. But that unknown woman to the public might have been his mother or his sister or his second wife. Therefore, the mufti can use vastly reported occurrences of him being with another woman to further investigate, but he can't justify divorce simply based on the general report, on merely the assumption of who that woman is. There has to be hard evidence as to a infraction having been committed. Istishab, and this is the continuity of a ruling, what we talked about earlier, similar to stare decisis. Istishab is the continuity of a ruling, whether due to the presence of rational permissibility or textual or the absence of textual permissibility. We said earlier, al-ibahatu al-aqliya or al-ibahatu al-shar'iyya, or the continuity of a consensus, that there is ijma' and everybody agrees on that until today. In order for a mufti to ascertain the facts of a fatwa, or the facts surrounding a fatwa, this issue of continuity takes two roles. There's forward continuity and reverse continuity. Forward continuity is taking the past and pulling it into the present. So if somebody asks about a situation, okay, and it was known that the exact same situation existed prior to this fatwa being requested, and it remains the same, then he simply goes, hey, this past scholar answered that, and this is your answer. A very simple example. Those who run a tab at a store are considered to be in debt, and that debt must be paid. You took the item then, you did not pay it until now. It is not paid until you've actually paid it off. So somebody comes and he says, comes in front of a mufti and he says, this person, or in front of a judge, and he says, this person has been taking items from my store and not paying me. I want him to pay that debt. I have a ledger here that shows that he's running a tab. The other person says, no, the basis of the Sharia is that you are innocent until proven guilty. There's nothing to say that I didn't pay. We say, no, the continuity of that tab remaining open and not being conventionally marked off like everybody else in the ledger so shows that you did not pay your debt. Unless you have written proof or a receipt or a transfer, we're going to consider that debt to be unpaid. Reverse continuity is taking the present and presuming it was the same in the past. What this means is that when a situation is asked about, even if we don't have prior knowledge, we can assume that because a right, a claim, or an entitlement is present now, that it existed in the past. So, for example, a man claims he paid a debt. He has no evidence but his claims. His defendant refuses to take an oath that he did not pay, he did not receive payment. Can we assume the debt was paid, or is the opposite true? Meaning that I claim that I paid my tab off. The storekeeper says, I don't have a ledger, like in the first example. I don't have anything except his claim and mine. But I'm the storekeeper and he owes me money. What did the Prophet ﷺ said? Al-bayyinatu ala al-mudda'i wal-yaminu ala man ankar. So, if he comes and he says, no, he owes me money, all the man has to say is, I swear to Allah, I do not owe him money. If he refuses to take that oath, then we can say the claim of a debt still stands. Why? Because not only is there a claim against him, but that claim is probably continuous. So it's an issue of the probability of that claim. Okay. Yeah, that was it, actually. So that's istishab, and we'll do more tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, when we talk about how to issue a Hanbali fatwa. But with that, inshallah, this is probably the shortest shortest one that we've done so far. But I hope that it has been beneficial, and I'll open the floor for questions if you have them. I think next week, inshallah, we're gonna add the sessions about books of usul, books of qawaid, and hopefully books of aqidah as well. And I'll announce kind of when we're able to do that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Barakallah feek, Rashid. Appreciate it. Muhammad Shiha, Jazakallahu khairan wa baraka feek. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I'm going to let you guys go. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.